This is Gala Avary reporting to you virtually about the Video Archive Cinema Club, the 20-seat secret cinema located within the Vista. Today, I am joined on the airwaves by Video Archive Cinema Club manager Matt Landsman to chat about the calendar for the week of Monday, January 13th. Hey, Matt.
Hey Gala, this is our first time recording separately for one of these episodes, but I'm really happy that we were able to make it happen.
I am too. So, as our listeners know, we had a little break over the holidays and now we are back in the theater. Some great shows played last week with some amazing crowds that came out, and we are even further touched because Los Angeles is currently experiencing an extreme disaster and fires are all over the city with hundreds of thousands of people being impacted. I'm an Angelino born and raised, and I love my city. So to see our neighborhoods coming together and supporting each other really affects me deeply. I love you guys.
I just have to say that I think it's really cool that we're staying open for the people who need something to do, who need to take their mind off of what's going on. Like it was really like cool to me to see that the Beverly and the Vista were like keeping their doors open, and I'm going to be there like unless I have to evacuate or the theater has to evacuate or anything like that. Like I think it's important that people have a place to go where there's air conditioning and water and snacks and just something that they can take their mind off of everything that's going on. And I got very emotional in Pam's coffee the other day, actually, just like being there and saying hi to Nava and Natalie and everybody, and just kind of realizing like what a safe space that has become for me, like what a special place Pam's Coffee in the Vista is. So we're gonna be there for you guys, no matter what. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel the exact same way. I know a lot of people who have lost their homes and have nothing right now. And there are places in the city that are opening their doors and saying, like, hey, we're still here for you. And I feel like the Vista and the Bev and the Cinema Club and Pam's are one of those places because people need an escape from what's going on, and some people might just need a place to go sit for a couple of hours. And so to be able to do that is just really great and really special, and to get hydrated and also to see friends. Because when you're in this crazy world, you kind of forget that there are friends out there, you know?
it was kind of nice last night to like sit back there and watch people watching I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was really great. And people sort of like, I don't know, just coming together and like laughing in spite of everything that's going on, and just like having a great time at the movies. And I kind of felt this like wave of solidarity in the air, and like Angelino's like stronger together as we're kind of experiencing these movies together. So I hope that everyone listening is safe, and I hope that you're with your families and your pets and your loved ones, and that everyone is okay.
I do too. So, Matt and I are going to wait until I hope that we're together next week to talk about the actual design of the calendar. But, Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about the overall theme of the month? And I'm going to have to ask you to highlight your top pick screening.
So the overall theme of the month was sort of playing movies that are really fun to see with an audience. We wanted to cover a wide variety of genres. I think there's something in there for everyone. Like, I think when you're designing a New Year's calendar, a January calendar, you really want to bring in all kinds of people to the theater who like all kinds of different movies. So we have sci-fi, we have dramas, we have musicals. We opened the month with musicals. We have genre movies, we have exploitation movies like Coffee, we have horror movies, my favorite, and we have like independently made movies. It's just, in my opinion, a really cool, diverse lineup. There's no like one theme, but there's like a couple tributes to specific things and some really interesting pairings. And I was really happy that we were able to get it off the ground after a little bit of a hiatus.
Yeah, and it also looks like this month we have a lot of like really cool, especially with the doubles. Like we have tributes. So like we had the Elvis tribute on his birthday on Thursday, and then we have a John Carpenter one coming up that we're going to talk about. We have a Fleischer one. We have a Crichton one. So this month is full of some really great picks and a lot of movies that I really love. But Matt, what is your pick of the month? I have to know.
So that's a very interesting question because all things considered, My favorite movie that we're playing this month, like just favorite, is Waterworld, the Kevin Costner movie. I am a big fan of this movie. But I think in terms of the screening experience, and I'm saving talking about Waterworld until we end up talking about it,
Until
I
that
think
week, yeah.
I think in terms of the screening experience, I'm very, very excited to show the Mark Borchardt double feature of Coven and Modus Operandi. These are two movies that pretty much never play theatrically. I think it will be a fast sellout. And if you don't know what that is, Mark Borchardt was the subject of the acclaimed documentary American Movie, and Coven is the movie that he is making in American Movie. So to be able to show that after the Beverly has shown American Movie a couple months ago is very, very cool. And I love Mark Borchardt, and he also stars in Modus Operandi. And those are a couple of films that it's just like, where else can you see that? So I'll give that my pick of the month.
Especially because I believe Coven, but I know Modus Operandi are both like also VHS titles. So like they're known to be VHS titles, which is what this theater's all about.
Can I try to guess the Gala pick of the month?
Sure, you can try. I think you'll get it.
Well, it's a tough one because I know you love Bud Buddicker, so Comanche Station is definitely a Gala favorite with Randolph Scott, who was in the spoilers. But I also know you love Michael Crichton, and you're a big fan of Looker, and Coma was covered on the Video Archives podcast. So I think I'm going to roll the dice on this one and say that the Gala pick of the month might be the Looker Coma double feature.
Matt, you know me too well, and I know that next week when we start talking about Looker and Coma, I'm probably going to have a lot to say. I talked about Looker a little bit in my wrap up for 2024 on the Gala show, and I've argued ad nauseum about Coma on Video Archives podcast, both on the main show and the after show. And I even have the novelization of the movie, but I haven't yet read that.
Do
Or
you
maybe
have the cool big box MGM Coma?
I do not. I think I just have the slipcover. I'll have to double check though, because you never know. I could pull it out. I bought another Train Killer tape. Don't tell anyone.
They are
um,
listening.
they're listening. We're going to talk more about Looker and Coma next week, and then Coven and Modus Operandi the following. But now let's get on into this week's movies. So, first up, we've got Tuesday, January 14th, 2 p.m. show, Zabriskie Point. Matt, you can take it away on this one.
So this is an Antonioni film. It's his second English language movie, and he was promoting Blow Up, and he saw a newspaper article about a kid who stole a plane and kind of decided to build a movie around that. And this is a big hippie movie. It's from 1970, and it starts with a meeting of these students, black students and white students, really passionately arguing about a strike on the campus. They're actually like having this like impassioned argument about, can white people be revolutionaries? And I think it's a perfect matinee movie. Most of it, if not all of it, is set during the daytime. It has a really eclectic soundtrack: Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, which might have something to do with why it's not on any official streaming channels, as far as I can tell. And I think this movie is sort of characterized by this big, steamy desert sex scene where these people are rolling around naked and like kicking up all this dust, and they're like covered in sand. But there's this whole other side of this movie that people don't really think about much, with the counterculture and with the sort of student riots that are going on. But basically, this guy named Mark, who's played by a actor named Mark Frechette, and I will talk about Mark Frechette after this, um, he steals a little plane. There's a little pink plane, and he's at this like student protest, and he's wandering around, and he's kind of like going around to like gas stations asking for like if he can like bum a sandwich and stuff, and then he steals a plane and just like flies it out into the desert. Meanwhile, this girl, who is played by Daria Halprin, she's like driving a Jeep out into the desert. She's like being having like this weird run-in with like this group of children, and these two people just kind of find each other, and he starts like flying circles around her in this plane out in the desert at this real place in the desert called Zabriskie Point. And he like throws like a red t-shirt out of the plane at her, and she like flags him down with the red t-shirt, and then he lands the plane and they hit it off, and they have crazy sex in the desert before
Rolling
he
around.
has to sort of fly the plane back into the city. And I won't spoil it, but the ending of this movie is extremely haunting and extremely beautiful. I won't give it away, but it's like an ending you're gonna like want to watch again and again after you see the movie. And it's very telling that like Antonioni's original ending was a shot of the airplane skywriting the phrase "Fuck you, America," um,
Wow.
because it is this sort of counterculture statement piece. It's about these sort of disenfranchised young revolutionaries who kind of say screw it to society, and they go out to the desert to screw it. And Mark Frechette, who was cast in this movie, I think because like one of Antonioni's casting team saw him at a bus stop, saw that he just, I think the quote is that he was like full of hate or something. Like he just looked like a hateful kid, and he was like known for committing all these crimes and stuff. And after the movie, he did a couple other movies and became like a brief celebrity and did some like magazine covers and stuff. But after a couple of years, he just went back to committing crimes, and he literally got arrested for doing a bank robbery and died in jail 5 years after this movie came out.
That's pretty crazy.
It is. And Daria Halpern, who co-stars with him in this movie, she didn't really do many other movies either. She was kind of went on to become a therapist from what I was reading. So this is sort of a counterculture daytime classic. It's a movie that I feel like you hear referenced a lot, but not many people have seen. It was kind of a bomb in its time, but at least critically, but I think it's gone on to be reappraised as a great work of Antonioni. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. The cinematography is really beautiful. Like I said, the ending is really haunting, and it's just a very like raw portrait of its time.
And that again is playing on Tuesday, January 14th at 2 p.m. Okay, now playing on January 15th at 2 p.m., this is one of my all time favorite movies, Logan's Run. I am so excited, Matt, that you guys are playing this at the Cinema Club.
I did not realize that this was an all-time Gala favorite.
Yes, I actually even have in my kitchen, which I'll share over on our Patreon. I've started doing, because Matt takes these amazing photographs of like all the boxes, and like even anything on his Instagram is so just like perfectly photographed. But he takes all these really great photographs of all the boxes and any cool materials that Quentin has. And so we've kind of started, I've put together a newsletter that comes out every Monday on Patreon for free. You can sign up for free and you can see all these cool things. But I will pop in that newsletter my Japanese poster of Logan's Run along with its matching counterpart calendar from the year that it was released. I have them in these like kind of sparkly frames in my kitchen, and they're like one of my highlighted pieces
Do
of
I
movie
know
memorabilia.
the guy who did the frame job for
Yes,
that?
you do.
um, that's such a cool piece of memorabilia. Was it Exotic
Yeah, I
Originals
bought it
who
from Dave over at Exotic Originals. He's like where I get all my Japanese posters from. But it was just a really, I actually think he included it as a gift to me for my birthday. So that was just super nice of him. He's great at Exotic Originals. If you're ever looking for Japanese posters or Thai posters, that's where I would recommend to go. But Logan's Run is like a Roger favorite also. That's obviously why it's one of my favorites. It stars Michael York and Jenny Agutter.
I love
And
in Cabaret, Michael
yeah,
York.
obviously, he's amazing in Cabaret. But Logan's Run is basically, it is the 23rd century, and everyone lives, I think, to be honest, when I was younger, I thought everyone was like living until they were 40, and I think it's
It's 30.
25. Oh, it's 30.
It's 30, yeah.
I'm going to carousel soon, Matt. You got to be careful.
It says it in the, well, I've already escaped the bubble. This society really favors the young, and they only are supposed to live till 30, and there's a crystal in their hand that blinks red when they're almost out of time, and when they're out of time they have the ability to like do this thing
They go
called
to this
going to
thing. Yeah, they
carousel.
go to carousel and they basically commit suicide. And it is a very, what people would think, dystopian idea for a movie that, like, well, when you reach a certain age, you just do suicide. Well, it's kind of coming true today in our day and age. Assisted suicide is legal in California, amongst other places. And it's a very prevalent thing that people are now kind of having to deal with. And Logan's Run, I watched recently again during kind of, I was going through something and I watched Logan's Run and it just like resonated with me even further, and it was just an amazing experience. And I've talked with Roger about this one. Well, I'm sure people that listen to the Gala show have heard my special with Roger where we discussed Logan's Run, because we watch it, I think we watched it on Solstice last year or the year before, 2023.
I mean, I think it's very interesting because it sort of has elements of these other sci-fi movies in it, which
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
personally I like more, like Blade Runner and Planet of the Apes, where Logan plays a character that's called a Sandman, which is sort of a Blade Runner. They're supposed to track down the people who are called runners, who are people that are trying to escape the carousel. And the premise of this movie is that he is tasked with infiltrating this sort of society of runners who live in a place called Sanctuary, which is like beyond the dome where they all live in. And he discovers as he goes beyond the dome with this woman who is sort of sympathetic with the runners that actually they don't have to die at age 30, and that there's this whole world outside of it. And that's sort of like a Planet of the Apes type thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of like kind of what was going on in the zeitgeist at that time when all of those movies were coming out. And we see also, I think, a lot of the reasons why this one might resonate with me a little bit over some of the other ones. Like, for example, this Logan's Run resonates with me over Blade Runner, is because this is less of like a cyberpunk, whereas Blade Runner has a little bit more of that.
Yeah,
And
and that's kind of just like the difference in our like taste in like film aesthetic, where like I love the sort of like Shibuya looking like
like
look
rain
of
and
Blade
wet
Runner,
and Blade
and
Runner.
and
But
I
I
kind
like
of
more of the slick.
and well, and this has that like kind of like almost, it's a 70s movie, but it has that, it's 76, but to me it looks almost like a 60s movie. Like the way it has the like leotards and like that early vibrant colorful sci-fi look.
Yeah, exactly. And also all the model work. I really love the model work on. But Logan's Run is also just like a really special movie. It's a really deep thinking movie. I mean, kind of like a la Rollerball a little bit, like where you're thinking who's really controlling the information that I'm being given. And I think it's just really great. I also had the chance when I was in Dallas. Eric Clapp from Cinema Force took me to the shooting location of Logan's Run, so I got to photograph it. I got to stand on the steps that they feature in the end of the movie. It was an amazing experience. If you have not seen Logan's Run and you're looking for just like a fun thing to do during the day, kind of science fiction that has turned into science fact, you should head on over to the Cinema Club January 15th, 2 p.m. I think it's a really good daytime show.
I like when they're doing their little hedonist like party in his apartment, they like start like spraying this like red gas into the air. Like that felt just like a very like futurist kind of like specific thing. It's like the kind of world building that I like, where they're not really explaining what that is. Liked that little detail. There's a lot of really cool visual stuff in this movie, not just the carousel scenes, which I heard were really challenging for them to figure out and how to film. Shout out to Roscoe Lee Brown, who plays Box, the like kind of terrible looking but charming robot who's like
Oh, yeah.
he's like the guardian of like the liminal ice fortress, which like blockades the world from the bubble. And he has that line he keeps saying, like plankton, fish from the sea, or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And this also has a little bit of Soylent Green in it too, in those ways. So it's just like, if you love the movies that we've mentioned, I mean, like we've mentioned Soylent Green, we mentioned Blade Runner, we mentioned Planet of the Apes. Like that's this kind of vibe that you're going to be getting during this movie.
And we're going to mention Soylent Green again on this episode. Stay tuned.
Oh, I'm so excited because that is also one of my favorite movies. Okay, now we have a big day on Thursday, January 16th at 7:30 p.m. because guess what? Happy birthday, John Carpenter. We are celebrating his birthday by playing two of his movies. We have Eyes of Laura Mars with co-hit In the Mouth of Madness.
And I believe, Gala, that Eyes of Laura Mars was covered on Video Archives podcast by yourself and Quentin and Roger.
Yes, it was actually part of our American Giallo double feature that we did. So that's episode 107 and 108. And Eyes of Laura Mars was covered on episode 107, and Eli Roth was there. So if you want to hear Eli, Quentin, and Roger talk all about Eyes of Laura Mars, you can go ahead. The episode is there on the Video Archives podcast feed. It's number 107. And I have to say, on the awards, I said that this was my favorite movie of the four that we watched, over Dressed to Kill. And that isn't really true, but I do really, really like this movie. It is a really fun time. I've researched this movie. I had a lot of interesting things just about like how Tommy Lee Jones was cast in the film. Basically, there's a little bit of conflicting information about him and Lady Faye and like their relationship and their struggle on set of like if they liked each other, if they didn't. It's basically about a photographer who gains the ability to see through a killer's eyes. And she begins to replicate through her photography these murder scenes that have not been published to like, you know, like when you go see like, I don't know, TV show and you might see the crime scene photography that they've taken. Well, these photos have not been published, but somehow Laura Mars is able to replicate them in her fashion way. And Tommy Lee Jones plays the investigator that is kind of following after her and making sure that she's safe because they're not sure if someone's following her, if she's involved, etc. And they kind of fall in love over it. And it's a really cool look at New York. Brad Dourif is in it. One of
Your
my
favorite?
all-time faves. I love my man Brad Dourif. He's a Star Trek actor, plays Suitor, the Beta Z, who has no feelings in Voyager. And he's one of my favorite actors, so whenever he's in anything, he's always a highlight. And Roger and Quentin love his line. I think it's like, why do you carry that knife? To cut rope. It's just like...
He has a great voice. He's very well known for voicing Chucky.
Yes, he is very well known for voicing Chucky, amongst several other interesting, like, he's a really great character actor. But Eyes on Laura Mars, like, it has just, like, these really interesting techniques of, like, how they're using the POV that I enjoy, and then also how they just use the photography and, like, use the gallery and use New York. It really feels like it is its own creature. Now, the co-hit of this double feature, Matt, I have to ask, because you're a huge John Carpenter guy, like a huge John Carpenter guy. So why did you pick these two movies specifically?
Well, I really wanted to showcase some of his underseen movies that I really like. Obviously, Halloween gets a lot of play. The Thing is a masterpiece. We all love Big Trouble in Little China. We all love Christine. We all love The Fog. But I really feel like these were the ones that were kind of underserved. And Eyes of Laura Mars is, of course, a Video Archives podcast title, but I am a big fan of In the Mouth of Madness, and I think that it is probably the last truly great John Carpenter movie from 1994. This was past his initial run of all those hits that I just mentioned, and this is sort of a Lovecraftian story starring the great Sam Neill, who we all love from Jurassic Park, and it's actually what John Carpenter considers to be part of his unofficial Apocalypse trilogy, which was like his 3 movies that depicted different ways that the world could end. And that was The Thing and Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness. And I think this movie is actually really scary. I think it sort of ties Prince of Darkness as his scariest movie, maybe. And it's sort of adapted from Lovecraft stories. It borrows different elements from different Lovecraft stories, like the idea of like Hobbs End is sort of something inspired by Lovecraft. They mention Pickman, like the Pickman family in this, which is sort of recurring characters from the Lovecraft lore. And basically the plot is this. There is a writer named Sutter Kane who, I guess, like, in theory, that's sort of an amalgamation of Stephen King and Lovecraft. Like, his work more resembles Lovecraft, but he's this best-selling paperback author whose paperbacks really have the like Stephen King vibe to them. And Sam Neill goes to investigate the source of this writer and who is this reclusive writer who lives in this black church off in this town somewhere. And because when every time one of his books comes out, people start going hysterical and like apocalyptic crazy things start happening. And Sam Neill goes to this town, this Hobbs End town where Sutter Kane lives and sort of owns the town as well, which maybe is supposed to be like Bangor, Maine, where Stephen King lives. And he is faced with all of these nightmarish monsters and these crazy K&B and ILM creations with like really horrific practical effects. And a lot of the Sutter Kane quotes in the movie are actually just Lovecraft quotes. So I love that it was one of the real life most prolific horror authors sort of being seen through the lens of like Stephen King, who's like another one of the other like prolific real life horror authors. And then it was, of course, directed by, you know, probably the greatest horror director of all time, John Carpenter. And like I said, there's some pretty sticking imagery in this movie. There's like the thing with the kid on the bicycle where he like drives past Samuel on a bike, and then later in the movie he passes by on a bike and he's an old man. And by the way, that kid on the bicycle, Hayden Christensen, in his first role. Oh, this movie is full of like my favorite like that guy actors, like Peter Jason from They Live and David Warner from Waxwork. I love David Warner, and John Glover, and even Charlton Heston. So it has a stacked cast. It's like kind of underseen Carpenter. This movie doesn't play often. I was looking at the last time it played in LA, and I think it's been a couple years since it was maybe a midnight at the New Beverly. So I just thought it would be a really good one to play for John Carpenter's birthday. That theme song is really awesome in this movie. Obviously, John Carpenter does a lot of his own music in all of his movies, but the In the Mouth of Madness theme song, I think he wanted like a Metallica song or something and couldn't get it, and he ended up doing his own theme song, which plays over these like Sutter Kane books being printed, and he's just like shredding. Like the song is, it goes so hard, and it doesn't even need to go that hard for this like investigative horror movie about this like Lovecraftian author, and the song is just like hard rock. It's awesome. So I think this will be a really fun double feature, and I think people will probably stay for both movies.
Well, even though, in all admissions, I am not a fan of In the Mouth of Madness, I have many, many friends who are and who have been dying to see this on a big screen because, as Matt said, it does not play very often. So I think this is a really rare and special chance to get to both see two underappreciated John Carpenter films, and also to celebrate John Carpenter's birthday, because he's a lot of people's favorite director. And even if we're not celebrating with him in person, it's always great. Just, you know, people feel the love when you think about them and when you like celebrate them, even if they don't know it.
Happy birthday to the legend John Carpenter. And if you go see this movie, you will see Quentin's tape from the video archives of Eyes of Laura Mars on display, which is a very unique
Oh yeah, it's that
version
white
of
box.
this movie. Yeah, which like I haven't seen that anywhere.
Yeah,
And
and it's beautiful.
I have just like a slipcase version of it at home. So the version of it that you'll see on display is very, very cool looking too.
Hey guys, it's Gala coming at you after the fact of recording. Just to let you know that we have a low ticket alert for the John Carpenter double feature. So if you're listening to the episode and you know that you want to stop by the Cinema Club and see this John Carpenter double feature for his birthday, make sure to head on over and buy your tickets right now. And if they're sold out by the time that you hear this, remember there is always a chance and a standby line. And Matt always tries to get as many people in the theater as he possibly can that are in standby. So head on over and get your tickets now because we have a low ticket alert.
Well, Gala, I think it's time for a snack break.
Oh my God, I'm so hungry.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And we're back from our snack break.
So, Matt, seeing that we're not at the Cinema Club, where normally you and I would go and either peruse the Vista's counter and see what an actor would like to eat, or we talk about someone that came into the theater recently and what they like to order. I have a question for you.
Yes.
What's your favorite at-home movie watching snack?
So I have come back with one of my favorite snacks that I keep in my house, and that is Laura Bar's Trail Mix bars, which contain chocolate coconut macaroons and almonds. And if you don't know what Laura Bar is, they're a very healthy company that uses minimal ingredients. For instance, this has almonds, unsweetened coconut, and semi-sweet chocolate chips, and Honey Crisp rice, and oat flour, and pecans, and coconut oil, and salt, and that's it, which is not many ingredients for this type of sort of. It is essentially a granola bar, but if you know me, you know that I love coconut, so my chocolate coconut macaroon Laura bars are my at-home snack. How about yours, Kala?
Well, you know me, if I'm watching a movie, I will eat literally anything in front of the movie. I'll sit down and I will eat a whole plate of pasta. I'll eat a stir fry. I'll eat a pad thai. But my favorite snack, because that's where we're kind of going, it's kind of difficult because, is a bowl of cereal a snack?
You love nachos.
I do love nachos, but I'm not eating that at home, really. I eat those unless they're from Finney's. I've been getting the Finney's. By the way, Matt, you can get the Finney's nachos with no carnitas on them, and they're really good. So next time we're at Finney's, I have to introduce you to that. But my favorite at-home snack when I'm just snacking, I like to eat. There are these little shortbread fingers from Trader Joe's. I really like those because I can eat them because they have no egg in them. I also really love chocolate-covered almonds. That's been my big thing. Lawson's, or I guess it's pronounced Lassen's, but Lawson's has these keto almonds, and I'm totally addicted to them. And I love lime chips and hot sauce with sour cream.
Oh,
That's
I
what
love
I'm eating.
chips.
Yeah, I eat these. I eat Chica chips, but they're the lime flavored ones, and I put the Yellowbird hot sauce all over them, and then I dip them in sour cream. And it's that's what I'm snacking on if I'm watching a movie at home, because I can't eat that at the theater.
You know what's good to put a drop of on a chip is truffle hot sauce. Truff hot sauce.
Interesting. I don't have any truff, but David, the projectionist of the New Beverly, just gifted me a whole thing of hot sauces. So maybe there's something like that in there.
And I think that brings us back to January 17th at 7:30 p.m., where we have a classic Universal Monsters double feature of The Wolfman and the Mummy.
Yeah, like Matt said earlier in the episode, it is so amazing to see how many different kind of genres and decades are being featured on this calendar. And obviously on January 17th, with The Wolfman and the Mummy, we're playing some really classic horror titles. And I love the fact that we are playing a mix of kind of more quote-unquote modern movies with stuff like Eyes of Laura Mars and In the Mouth of Madness. And then we're going all the way back to the 30s and 40s the next night to see The Wolfman and the Mummy.
And this was a Jules programming pick, but I love it because Jules and I are both huge fans of the Universal Monsters. How can you not be? Many of Gala and I's mutual friends are as well. And I think that is because they are the periodic table of elements of horror. Every Universal monster represents something deeply elemental within the genre, and we have never shown a Wolfman or a Mummy movie here. It's interesting because we've been slowly making our way through the Universal catalog. We did The Invisible Agent, which is a Invisible Man movie on a beautiful 16mm print, and I would love to show Invisible Woman, by the way, someday, because that has John Howard. And we did The Creature from the Black Lagoon on a 3D VHS. We did Spanish Dracula, the sort of underseen Spanish version of Dracula. And we did a print of Dracula's Daughter and a 16 print of Abbott and Costello Meet Jekyll and Hyde. And we've also done a good amount of Karloff, from Black Sabbath to Targets, which is so good. If you haven't seen Bogdanovich's Targets
is amazing. Targets is amazing.
It's one of the best things we've ever shown at the Cinema Club. And in fact, Quentin likes it so much that he wrote an entire review on it, which we had copies of for the people that went and saw it that day. But we've never done a Wolfman or a Mummy movie here. And this one is timed well because on that exact same day that it comes out, a new Wolfman movie is coming out in theaters, a new remake, which I'm eager to see, directed by Leigh Whannell, who's one of my favorite modern horror directors.
Wow, that's so exciting because honestly, then you can kind of go on the 17th and see the Wolfman, and then you can go the next night if you wanted to and go see the new Wolfman.
I can't pass judgment on the new Wolfman yet, but I will say it will be hard to top Lon Chaney Jr. as Larry Talbot in the original movie. He is so amazing in this movie. I go back and forth over who my favorite performance is in the Universal Monsters, and even though I love Claude Rains as the Invisible Man, and I love Boris Karloff as the monster in Frankenstein, and obviously Karloff is great in The Mummy as well. And I think it comes down to Bela Lugosi as Dracula or Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, because he is so soulful and so sympathetic in this movie. And not only does he play the man side of the Wolfman so well, but he has this amazing physicality that he blends with, once he gets the curse and becomes the Wolfman, he brings this whole physical performance element to it that I think is so amazing. Lon Chaney Jr., if you haven't seen this movie, God, he is good in it. And I hope I'm saying this right. Kurt Siodmak, the great screenwriter Kurt Siodmak, he basically is the guy who is responsible for a lot of the werewolf legends that we know to this day, like being marked by a pentagram or needing to be killed by silver bullets. Like Kurt Siodmak invented a lot of that lore for this movie, and he created the famous verse, "Even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when wolfsbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright." So I think this is one of
Wow.
the better Universal horror movies, and it's because of Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi's in it too, who's amazing.
Well, what I really, really love is that we get a lot of love for Dracula. That's kind of the monster that everyone knows. So I'm really loving this Lon Chaney Jr. love because his performance is really magnificent. And then on the second half of it, when we have Boris Karloff, how I like, by the way, that he has a subtitle called Karloff the Uncanny
Well, what's
as
funny
the
about
mummy.
that? He didn't want to be in. That was sort of just like how he was known, was like Karloff the Uncanny. He didn't want to be doing like parody type stuff of his Universal horror work, and at first he like turned down being in the Abbott and Costello movies, but then they ended up doing a Abbott and Costello meet the killer Boris Karloff movie, and I think it's called like The Killer Boris Karloff. And he was also a Dick Tracy villain. Gruesome was the character, or Dick Tracy meets Gruesome, that we showed in the first month of the Video Archive Cinema Club. So we've had a lot of Karloff love here, from Black Sabbath to, of course, now we're finally, after all this time, showcasing him in one of his classic actual monster roles.
Yeah, and also it's great because again, this is another movie, and I actually think these Universal monster films are like the perfect way to introduce children to horror movies because they are scary, but they're not that scary, and they're not graphic in the way that modern horror is graphic. And so I think this would be a really, really fun evening show to make it like a daddy daughter date, or like bring your kids and like have some fun at the cinema club watching some classic horror. And then, of course, you're going to have all those old heads that just love the Universal monsters. They're going to show up, they're going to show out. I bet there's going to be some great t shirts in the audience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So many modern artists that I love have continued to reinterpret these movies. Obviously, the great classic posters speak for themselves, but I do love the work of Francisco Francavilla and of Jason Edmiston and many of the modern horror artists who have sort of put their own spin on this.
And for our very, very last show of the week, we have a Richard Fleischer double feature on Saturday the 18th at 7:30 p.m. We have See No Evil with co-hit 10 Rillington Place.
And I said that Soylent Green would come up again on this episode, and here we are, doing our tribute to Richard Fleischer, who was an American director who did a number of British movies, and he did so many big movies. It's kind of crazy that you don't hear his name come up too often, because he was such a prolific filmmaker. He did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for Disney. He did the original Narrow Margin in 1952. He did these two movies in the the same year, and he would do Soylent Green 2 years later, which is a movie that my dad and I love watching together, which I'd love to play someday.
Yeah, and you've heard us talk actually. I mean, we've talked about him a little bit on the Video Archives podcast when it came to The Last Run and his history with that movie. But Quentin and Roger have mentioned him countless times, besides the movies that Matt just mentioned. I mean, like Tora, 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 Fantastic Voyage. I've always wanted to see The Boston Strangler. Haven't gotten around to it yet, but I think this is my chance. And it's just like he's done so many movies. It's kind of crazy, as Matt said, that his name does not come up more often.
And I'm actually going to hit you with a controversial take, because I know you've said that your mom loves the original John Milius Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, it's like one of our favorite movies.
But I gotta say, Richard Fleischer did Conan the Destroyer, and I actually kind of like that one a little bit more, because it's more high fantasy. It's like overt, like sword and sorcery fantasy, and I really love that subgenre of like the post Conan movies, like Deathstalker and stuff like that. And I felt like Conan the Destroyer like went more in that direction, where it like leaned into the like Conan-esque movies that came after Conan. And I don't know, I'm just a big fan of that subgenre, so shout out to Richard Fleischer for that. He also did Red Sonja, which is in that subgenre as well.
He's kind of done a little bit of anything and everything. And to be honest, I might classify him as a journeyman filmmaker.
I'm looking at the original RCA Columbia VHS of See No Evil, which has a great picture of Mia Farrow on the front. And I can read the back of the box, and then Gala can get into it. Blind Sarah's, Mia Farrow, world of darkness suddenly becomes a hideous nightmare in the suspense thriller See No Evil. After permanently losing her sight from a horseback riding accident, the young girl finds serenity in the Berkshire estate of her aunt, uncle, and their teenage daughter. Her calm haven is shattered when she stumbles across the bloodied and brutally murdered bodies of her 3 relatives. After hearing the killer's footsteps, Sarah frantically gropes her way to the stables and gallops away for her life. But soon, she's ensnared in a terrifying sequence of events that leaves no doubt that sometimes it's better to see no evil.
So when it came to this movie, I have to make a confession. I had always avoided this film, and it was kind of partially a mix between the poster and the description of the movie. And I'm going to explain it like this. I do watch a lot of Italian horror films, but Italian horror is not my favorite. And just kind of from the description and the poster and the title, it felt like one of those Italian horror movies that I've seen so many of, but I would rather watch, a psychological thriller. And I was so mistaken, because that is exactly what See No Evil is. See No Evil is this kind of like slow burning psychological movie that, I mean, of course we know Mia Farrow from Rosemary's Baby, but then like it also reminds me a little bit of like The Wicker Man. Like you have like this town in England, and they're kind of like all the locals and how they intermingle. And what the description on the back of the box leaves out, and I'm just going to give a little bit extra to it. Mia Farrow, who plays Sarah, has had a terrible accident in the movie where she has, I think, fallen off of a horse, or a horse bucked her off. And because of that, she has gone blind. And so after being in the hospital, she returns to her aunt and uncle's house to kind of just begin to live. And while she's there, an old flame who really does love her and has always loved her shows back up. And they have this wonderful relationship where they're mended together by their love of horses. And that's one of the big things about this movie, is that there is so much horseback riding in it and so much just beautiful landscape. And Mia Farrow, even though she is blind, and she is playing blind very well, it's one of the coolest aspects of the movie, she is not a character that takes anything lying down. She is 100% an active participant character in this movie. She isn't just allowing things to happen to her. She is always fighting back, and she is so smart. I love the way that the love story unfolds. I love the way that they shoot this. Gary Fisher is the cinematographer. You guys will know him from titles like The Exorcist 3, which I am absolutely crazy about. And of course, The Ninth Configuration too. So he was Blatty's guy, and Highlander and stuff like that. And Wolfen, which Quentin and Roger talk about all the time on this season of the podcast.
Albert Finney, who
has
shown up this month as well.
Yes.
Looker.
So he the way that they shoot this movie, the way that they characterize the killer, that you don't know who he is because all they show you is his cowboy boots. So it's all you know about him the entire movie are just these pair of cowboy boots. And it makes you feel just as blind as Mia Farrow is. And it's just an amazing reveal. The way the story unfolds is so great. I don't want to give anything away because it's like a tight 89 minutes. And this movie goes fast. The pacing is great. You are gripped from the beginning to the end. And when you finally see the reveal of just who this killer is, it's pretty shocking. So I'm not going to say anything more about it besides the fact that you should see it. I now understand why everyone likes Mia Farrow so much. So I really think to be honest, if Logan's Run like wasn't playing this week, because that's probably my pick of the week is Logan's Run, and if Looker wasn't playing next week, this See No Evil had like a really, really high. I even gave it a heart on Letterboxd, which I never do.
Well, so you might say this is like your favorite discovery of the month.
I think this might be my favorite discovery of the month for sure. I haven't yet seen 10 Rillington Place, which Matt is going to tell you all about. But if I had, maybe this would have been my double feature of the week.
I'm going to say that my double feature of the week is the John Carpenter double.
Of course.
I'm just such a big fan of him. But
yeah, no one assumed that you would switch your vote otherwise.
But 10 Rillington Place is another really interesting movie from the same year, from the same director, 1971. And this was based on an actual account of real murders. And it was partially filmed at the site of the real murders. And it stars Richard Attenborough and John Hurt, and it's almost a horror movie. There's elements of this movie that are really, really creepy. It's about real-life British serial killer John Christie, who killed people with gas. Like, he would, like, put this, like, gas line into this, like, liquid and then like cup it over someone's face, and he would gas them to death and then strangulate them. And it's funny because like it just like never worked very well anytime he was gassing someone to death, and he would have to like strangulate them after that. And it cuts away from what happens next, but it is implied that he has sex with the bodies as well. He was a really scary guy, and Richard Attenborough plays him, who I always think of as this serene, jovial presence, like the Hammond in Jurassic Park. And he's so scary in this movie. He almost looks like Toby Jones. He speaks in this very low, sort of almost like effeminate register that I just really recharacterized him as an actor for me. It doesn't make me not like him. It makes me respect him more because I've never seen him turn in this sort of performance. And this movie is sort of about the failure of the justice system, because Christie, the killer, he basically presents himself as this like doctor who's like sort of an amateur abortionist, and he comes to women who live in this apartment that he's sort of the manager of or the owner of, and he offers to help them sort of with their medical problem, and then he'll end up hitting them with this gas and murdering them. And he's hiding all the bodies like in the garden and in the cellar and all over the premises of 10 Rillington Place. And John Hurt and his wife are sort of convinced into moving into this apartment building by Richard Attenborough, and she becomes pregnant, and John Hurt wants her to keep the baby, and they have like a very kind of dated argument about this. And she doesn't want to keep the baby, and Richard Attenborough sort of talks her into letting him give her an abortion, but of course he actually just wants to murder her. Pins it on John Hurt, and John Hurt ends up going to trial for this, and I won't like really talk about where this goes, but it's a failure of the justice system. And I like this movie because that's what it's about. It's not like American Psycho. It's not like a examination into who Christie was, like why he was the murderer that he was, or what was going on into his head. It's about how he manipulates this guy into lying on the stand about crimes that he committed. And it's pretty grim. It's pretty bleak. It's a dark movie with very, very adult themes in it. And thankfully, a lot of it is implied, not shown. But this is probably, I mean, the darkest movie of the week, including things like In the Mouth of Madness.
One thing that really struck me about what you just said is that you said that there's a lot of things that are not shown. And I feel like that's also the power of See No Evil, is what Richard Fleischer chooses not to show you. And how he chooses to kind of half show things or just like give you a peek and then allow your mind to develop things into even worse. And I'm kind of glad that 10 Rillington Place is playing second, because even though I think See No Evil is probably the more popular of the two films, so that it would play first, but See No Evil, I think, doesn't have that kind of bleakness in it that you're talking about with 10 Rillington Place. It's a little bit more of just like a, I don't want to say fun.
This is a depressing, like,
yeah,
this is a feel bad movie.
You know what? See No Evil is not a depressing movie. It has a poignant ending, but it definitely has Mia Farrow fighting for her life and taking control despite the fact that she's blind.
I was watching this movie, for research purposes in the midst of, like, pretty much on the night that all of the fires were starting, and I was like watching Attenborough like breathing heavily, like strangling these women, and I was just like, good Lord.
Oh my God, it's like a 4DX experience right there. It's
yeah, and
terrifying.
outside you're hearing like helicopters and stuff, and I'm just like, oh my God, like I need to watch something happy, like Logan's Run or something.
Logan's Run is not happy necessarily. So sorry, Matt, you got it. But I think this is going to be a really fun double feature. I think starting with See No Evil is great. I think 10 Rillington Place is going to really take you there. And that is playing on January the 18th at 7:30 p.m.
And that wraps up this week at Video Archive Cinema Club.
Yeah, and I hope that next week we will be coming to you live from the Cinema Club, where Matt and I will be sitting together, not eating chuckles, because I will never eat a chuckle ever again. But remember, you guys, patrons get this episode one day early for free over at patreon.com/videoarchives. And plus, we have that weekly newsletter that I mentioned that comes out every Monday with pictures of all the boxes and any memorabilia. If you'd like to get your tickets to any of these shows, you can do so at
VistaTheaterHollywood.com.
And as always, follow them on Instagram at
Video Archives Club
for updates on show times and formats. You guys, I just want to give one last thank you to all of the listeners who have been so supportive during these disasters, who have been reaching out to make sure that everyone is okay at the Vista, at the Bev, at the Cinema Club, and on the podcast. It means so much seeing your messages coming through, both in my DMs and on the Patreon chat, which has just been alive with people asking how they can support and making sure that everyone's okay in Los Angeles. It really has touched me. And I also just am really touched when I heard Matt tell me that the night that they opened back up on January 9th for Jailhouse Rock and Viva Las Vegas, that people came to the shows. And then again with I Want to Hold Your Hand and Corvette Summer, that the audience just filled the room and really showed us like what Angelinos got in them. So I'm moved deeply and emotionally by this. And I just want to say a big thank you to all of your support for the city that we love.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very heartwarming seeing everyone coming together in spite of this awful tragedy, and we're just doing everything that we can to again make sure that people have a safe space to go, and we just really hope that everyone and their families are okay.
Thanks again, you guys. We'll see you guys next week for another weekly calendar episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
This calendar episode was produced by the Video Archives podcast and hosted by Gala, Avary, and Matt Landsman. Find even more of Video Archives on our Patreon, patreon.com/videoarchives. Copyright 2025, all rights reserved.